Hello YouTube and welcome to this video on Age of Empires 3 DE basic unit counters, hopefully the first in a series of videos based on the basics of Age of Empires 3 Definitive Edition. Please, if you do like this video, like, comment, subscribe, all of that business, but without further ado, let's get into the video. So one of the main or predominant unit counters that you will find in Age of Empires 3 Definitive Edition is ranged infantry, which beat heavy infantry. In this case, the ranged infantry are the skirmishers and the heavy infantry are the musketeers. So you can see if you let them fight it out by themselves without any micro or anything, the skirmishers do comfortably beat the musketeers. This is due to a number of factors, including their multiplier, which they have against heavy infantry. You can see here that they have a 2 times multiplier against heavy infantry, which can be upgraded to a 3 times, as well as the fact that the skirmishers have 0.3 range resistance or a 30% range resistance, which effectively means that they have 30% more HP against the musketeers' ranged attack. You can play on the advantages of the skirmishers even more if you want by looking at their range. The skirmishers have 20 range, the musketeers have 12. As a result of this, you can hit and run the musketeers or kite the musketeers. You can pick them off one by one. You can shoot at range and they will be able to hit you and you can hit them, as you can see here. Helps when they start to run away, but even if they don't do that, you pick off one, you pick off the next one, and you take very little damage. I mean, if I microed them better, I probably would have taken no damage. So you can see here, and the last time we lost about 6 or 7 skirmishers rather, this time we lost none. Heavy infantry, so these are melee heavy infantry, the pikes, and they completely destroy cavalry, both heavy and light cavalry. That is because they have a 5 times multiplier against cavalry, which you can see here. Their base stats are actually quite low, only 8 hand attack, but when you times that by 5, it makes 40. The fact that these heavy cavalry have a range resistance means that they don't resist any of their pikes' attack, and therefore the pikes completely tear through them. Heavy cavalry aren't weak against everything, however, as you can see here, they completely destroyed the skirmishers that we saw initially against the musketeers. If you get your heavy cavalry on top of a group of ranged infantry, they completely tear through them. The skirmishers' range resist does nothing against the heavy cavalry's hand attack, and as a result you completely tear through them. To add to this, the skirmishers have a negative multiplier against the heavy cavalry, which means that they barely take any damage at all, and you can see we're not even going to lose one hussar. Heavy cavalry do have their weaknesses though, and that is ranged cavalry. Ranged cavalry have a strong multiplier against heavy cavalry. You can see here you can hit and run. Obviously ranged attacks always beat hand attacks because you can do it at range, and you can see here that the ranged cavalry are quicker than the heavy cavalry, and as a result they can stay out of range. However, if you do let heavy cavalry get on top of your ranged cavalry, despite the fact that ranged cavalry counter the heavy cavalry, you can see here that the hussars do actually win it in a straight fight, so you do have to micro and be careful with your ranged cavalry. They've got 20% range resist, and this does nothing against the hussars' hand attack, so in a straight fight the hussars do win, but if you're a good player and you use your micro, you will win with ranged cavalry every single time. Due to their speed, they are the fastest unit in the game, ranged cavalry. As a result, they can run away from any fight apart from against other ranged cavalry. They can certainly run away from heavy cavalry and other infantry, and in the hands of a good player they are one of the most dangerous units in the game for sure. But ranged cavalry do have their weaknesses, of course, and that is ranged infantry. So it's not the hardest of hard counters, but it is a hard counter nonetheless. You see in a straight fight that the skirmishers, the ranged infantry in this case, completely tear the ranged cavalry to shreds. This is despite the fact that the ranged cavalry have a range resist, the skirmishers have a multiplier against them, and they just completely destroy them. So the skirmishers also have a high range, which means that they can pick them off at range, although if they wanted to, because of their speed, the ranged cavalry could of course just run away from the fight once they're out of range. Artillery is a complete game changer in Age of Empires 3 Definitive Edition if you get your artillery into a group of infantry, and we've got both heavy and ranged infantry here. You can see it completely tears them to shreds. It's taken out one there, It's taken out 2 there, it's taken most of the health off some others. They have a huge range resist, as you can see here, it's a 75%, so they effectively have 75% more health against ranged attacks. This does make them weak to hand attacks, but in this case, where it's been fired at by infantry, they only lose half of their health and take out the group of 10 easily. And like I say, this is both heavy and ranged infantry. They don't choose between them, they completely destroy both. But how do you kill your artillery? Well, slightly confusingly, you kill it with other artillery or anti-artillery artillery, in this case the culverin, the most common piece of anti-artillery artillery in the game. It sits at range, it kills most artillery in 2 shots. It has 34 range, which is much greater than that of the falconet, which actually has quite a good range in itself, but the culverin has even more. And you can see it just picks it off in 2 shots at range. No problems whatsoever. Even if you allow falconets to get close to your anti-artillery artillery or the culverins, in this case, I mean, you should never let falconets get this close, but even if you do, you can see the falconets do take off quite a lot of health, but ultimately you can mess around like I am here. You can still pick them off quite easily. It's killed 1. You move the culverin out of range like so there's the culverin, the falconet rather, packs up, and you turn around and you pick off at range like that. So it's a very easy micro, but it's one you have to learn as a beginner. Shock infantry, slightly confusing because they're not actually infantry, they're more like heavy cavalry, unique to the Aztecs and the Incas. Coyote runners in this case from the Aztecs completely tear ranged infantry to shreds, you can see here, because they're like heavy cavalry, which do the same. They're not quite as quick as cavalry, but they're a lot quicker than infantry. They get a little speed boost on attack here, the Coyote runners, and they make short work of any ranged infantry. They also destroy artillery. The Chima runners here from the Incas, they have a multiplier. You see, they don't get completely torn through like other infantry because they essentially act as cavalry despite having the infantry tag in their name. And you can see that the artillery does take off quite a lot of health, but it takes off nowhere near as much as it would with standard heavy or ranged infantry. And they're quite quick, and if you get them on top of a piece of artillery, it's game over for the artillery. Heavy cavalry, the same, like we say, heavy cavalry quite similar to shock infantry in many ways. You get your heavy cavalry on top of artillery, and this happens. Even with just 1 or 2 or 3 in this case pieces of cavalry, you don't need a large amount. If you get them around the side and get them around the back, it's game over. Shock infantry are countered by heavy infantry. You see the Rodoleros in this case, or the heavy infantry. They have a multiplier against the shock infantry, and as such, they make short work of them. This is the same for Musketeers and any other heavy infantry. They always have a multiplier against shock infantry. In most cases, however, the shock infantry would be able to just run away because they are quicker. Ranged cavalry also have a multiplier against shock infantry, as you can see here. This is the cavalry archer, very similar to the dragoon we saw earlier, the dragoon rather. And they do have a multiplier. Again, it's not one of the strongest in the game, and it is actually a hidden multiplier. It's not on the tooltip, but it is in the game. And you can see that they make short work of the shock infantry. They also have the cavalry archers have a hand attack resist, which means that they resist the melee attack of the shock infantry, so they effectively have more health against them, and they are quicker than them as well, so they can give them the run around. And just finally, ranged cavalry against artillery. Now, because of artillery's really strong range resist, you are probably better off putting your ranged cavalry in melee attack. Although the melee attack is much smaller, it still has a multiplier against artillery, and it negates the 0.75 or 75% range resist of the artillery. So if possible, the way to kill artillery with your ranged cavalry is to put them in melee mode, get them on top of the artillery, and take them out that way. Of course, if you have to stay at range, then you can use the ranged attack, and this does do sort of half of a job, but the much quicker way to kill artillery with your ranged cavalry, perhaps ironically for a piece of ranged cavalry, is to put them into melee attack. So that's the end of this video. Thanks very much for watching. I hope you did enjoy it. This video was just to give you a very basic overview of the main counters in Age of Empires 3 Definitive Edition. The counter system in the game is incredibly strong, so if you do want to play this game at any sort of level, then you do need to learn the counters, and I do hope that this video helps. As I say, if it did, please do like, comment and subscribe.